Welcome to Art This Week. I am Osinachi Okafor, and today we're at Museum of Fine Art, Houston, speaking with Daniel and Raquel Carrera about the exhibition Navigating the Wave, Contemporary Cuban Photography. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask you, how did you curate this wonderful exhibition? How did you select and how did you curate it?
The exhibition celebrates a major acquisition for us. We had about 100 post-revolution Cuban photographs in the collection, and then met and became friends with a Chicago-based collector named Madeline Plonsker. And Madeline had traveled to Cuba many, many times, beginning in 2002, became friends with many of the photographers that she met, and put together an amazing collection of about 300 photographs, Cuban photographs, that she discovered meshed perfectly with our collection, that where ours tapered off in the late 90s is where her collection picked up. And that planted the seed, the idea that wouldn't it be wonderful if the two collections could come together? And thanks to the generosity of Madeline and her husband Harvey, that has happened. And so this exhibition and the accompanying catalog celebrate that major enrichment of our collection. I think it's true in almost every exhibition that there's more that you would like to put into the show than can fit on the walls. So we have, there are actually 99 pictures by 47 artists in this installation. And we tried to tell as broad a story as we could. We also tried to shy away from the pictures that people already know for Cuba. So behind us, there are recognizable pictures, most famously the picture of Che Guevara by Alberto Corda. That's what everybody knows. And so we begin with that, but we begin with it briefly in a way to show what the rest of the show is not about. And we focused more on the period from 1990 to the present.
So I'm very curious to know, if Coda, for example, took the image of Che Guevara during this revolution, I'm sure so many other photographers did. How did you think photography shaped revolution in Cuba in the earlier years?
Well, by the time that Cuban Revolution triumphed, Cuba was a country with a very high level of illiteracy, and it was also a Catholic country. So image is very important for Catholic cultures, as you know. And to help communicate this new program that the new government had, several young photographers were hired and were brought closer to the more exclusive circles, to the big events, etc. People that had a background in journalism, but also in marketing and in fashion photography. And photography proved to be fundamental for the conditions that I've mentioned before. And even today, when we think about Cuban photography, many times we go back in time and we think about this photo and this body of work made by these photographers that actually shaped the visual image of the revolution.
So in this section of this exhibition, I could see some photographers exploring the body, specifically the male body. How do you think in a religious sect like Cuba, these photographers are coping with the LGBTQ issues in Cuba?
With the introduction of Marxism, Catholicism was sort of taken to a second place in Cuba. It was even forbidden at some point if you had a position in the government, etc. And the male body and its fragility, it's a topic that was not discussed through the very first years of the revolution. The body, and especially the male body, was used to express virility, to express power, to express the strength of the revolution. But through the years, a new generation came of age by the 1990s, late 80s. And this happened at the same time that religion was allowed again. So many things came together, and artists started exploring things and reacting to the previous photography that was made in Cuba. That's the case of Eduardo Hernandez Santos, who explores the fragility of the human body with these beautiful collages that you had the chance to see before. Still in a very subtle way, but he is definitely interested in talking about LGBTQ topics, because he was at the same time exploring his own sexuality while learning about photography and exploring Havana's underground scene.
His exhibition at the Fototeca, which is the National Center for Photography, was the first exhibition of male nudes, photographic male nudes in Cuba. What year was that? Do you remember?
I believe it was 1992.
Is what I was going to say also. The other thing related to religion is that you'll see a number of photographers, Juan Carlos Alom and René Peña, who take a renewed interest in religion, but not pure Catholicism. Rather, it's the blend of Yoruba traditions with Catholicism that created Santeria, a more folk religion. And while they're not trying to document it, they're exploring some of those ideas in the photographs that are included in the show.
The images here are so fascinating. I'm drawn to almost all of them. So this is going to be a tough question, but if you're going to choose, which of the pictures, the photographs, could you say is your favorite, or who is your favorite photographer amongst these curated works? Both of you can go.
Sure. I'll go.
Okay.
It's a hard question, indeed, because there are so many photographers in the show and so many different kinds of vision, so many different uses of photography. But actually the one that we're sitting next to is one that is a favorite of mine, one that I brought into the museum and have written about, by a photographer named Adrian Fernandez, who is also a sculptor. And what we're seeing here is a view along the Malecon, the seaside esplanade in Havana, looking north to the sea. And this huge structure there that seems to be in a state of disrepair. Was it a giant billboard that welcomed people arriving by sea to Havana? Was it a challenge to the United States across the sea? A declaration about the revolution? Looks like it could date from the 60s, the early days of the revolution. In fact, it doesn't exist at all. This part of the photograph, the road, the sea, the clouds, all of that is photographic, but the structure is all made in the computer. So just like an architect would use computer-aided design to help work out the particulars of the structure of a new building and to create an architect's rendering of what a new building will look like, he used that same kind of architectural program, worked with engineers and with computer experts to say, if I wanted to build this enormous structure, what would the girders need to be like, how many rivets, etc. And then instead of doing what most architects would do, showing how the building will look on day one when it's finished and it opens to the public, he said, asked the computer in a way, what would it look like with the passage of time? What would it look like after 50 years of hurricanes and salt air and waves crashing over the wall? How would it deteriorate? So why does he do that? Because this is his way of talking about the grand ambitions of the revolution, but the teetering ruins of its current state. How tenuous that connection to the ideals was, how it's fallen apart now. It's a statement about the current state of life in Cuba without being absolutely explicit about it.
If I had to choose a photo from the exhibition, I would say that my favorite one is the series The Image by Jose Figueroa. It's the one in which you can see the photos of Che Guevara drying over his bed. Figueroa became Alberto Corda's printer when he was, I believe, 17 years old. He is like the next generation of photographers. He was old enough to witness the revolution and to make his own opinion of it, but he wasn't part of the most active years of it. And Figueroa printed thousands of copies of this Che Guevara image for Alberto Corda, as he told us in Havana. And one night when he was waiting for them to dry over his bed so he could go to sleep, he reflected on how photography in Cuba had become not only a tool for propaganda, but also a commodity. And by taking his own photo of this process with this thought in mind, he, I believe, became the first Cuban artist in using photography for making a political comment or a social critique. And this photo is a turning point, is in our exhibition, from the previous generation to what the artist made after that.
Do I get to pick a second favorite?
Do you want to?
Yeah. The first section of the show is called Picturing Life, Joys and Hardships in Post-Revolution Cuba. And life was hard, and there are a lot of pictures of life being hard, but there were also joys. And there's a little group of photographs on one of the walls. There are two by a photographer named Alfredo Sarabia, who died at a young age in 1992. And he had made photographs for commercial purposes and for journalistic purposes. But in the last years of his life, he turned instead to photographing his family, and particularly his young son, also named Alfredo. And in a way, it was something more specific and individual because it was his family. But in another way, it was a more universal kind of subject. And there are two wonderful pictures by Alfredo Sarabia of young Alfredo, in one climbing into the Volkswagen Beetle through the window, and the other worried that his bicycle will fall off the wall of the Malecon into the sea. Young Alfredo was 6 when his father died, but he also has become a photographer. I think he uses his father's same camera. And he now has 4 young children himself. And we have pictures in the show of his children playing in and around that same 1972 Volkswagen Beetle that he uses to take his family out on excursions into the countryside or to the beach, things like that. It's a way that he connects to his father's legacy. And there's something just incredibly sweet and charming about the pictures, and wonderful about the kind of personal connection that has been forged by the medium of photography between Alfredo and the father that he lost at a young age.
Well, I feel like we've been brushing just quite across this image of Che Guevara. It's very important to me. I love it so much. Do you think you could tell me more about how Albert went about it, Alberta?
Well, the image of Che Guevara, first of all, as you can see, it's a different crop from the one you probably know. We decided to include the one that had other elements, also to show our audience how we were hoping to show them unexpected things about the history they already know. This photo was taken on the memorial that was made for the victims of an explosion in Havana. Che Guevara was on the stage, and according to the photographer, he stepped forward at some point, and in that moment he took the photograph. It's been reproduced in everything from refrigerator magnets to t-shirts to posters. And the photo was only published 7 years after it was taken. At this moment, when the memorial happened, the press chose other photos to depict the news, to show the news. And after Che Guevara's death, it's when this photo gets selected to be the cover of his diaries that was published.
Yeah. It becomes a kind of icon for the revolutionary self-sacrificing martyr, or the sort of the new saint, the new hero, it became a kind of symbol as much as a portrait.
Yes, it was used widely in Europe and in Latin America by the end of the 60s in several movements, as you know.
Thank you so much, Raquel.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Find all of our videos and sign up for our newsletter at artthisweek.com. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter.